I'm very glad that I can talk about one of my favorite subjects with a guy that who knows so much about it. He's the author of quite a few books on the two-tone era, and now the newest book is Too Much Too Young, a two-tone biography, I would call it. Welcome, Daniel Rachel.
Hi,
Hi.
Joachim.
Yeah, it's I'm so glad that you could take the time to do the interview, and maybe we could start and first on congratulations on the book. I really loved it, and yeah,
Thank you.
before
Dankeschön.
beforehand, I thought that yeah maybe there's not so much to learn from a new biography because some have been written by original members of the two-tone bands, but I thought it especially interesting and great that you had so many different views and they all came together. So and it was still great to read. Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
I think there's been great books by Neville Staple and Horace Panter and Pauline Black, but there's so many artists involved in Two Tone. With 7 members in each of the bands, and
yeah.
obviously one of the key voices is Jerry Dammers because he established Two Tone and formed the Specials.
Mm-hmm.
And to have all those voices, it just takes away from one person's perspective, and gives a more rounded view of the groups and the label, I hope.
Yes, yes, I'm sure of it, and it shows also shows the contradictions and the stress that was going on between the members and the different views of the same situation. That
Yeah,
was
there's so many contradictions. I mean, that's the key word of the book, really, because everybody has a different idea of what Two Tone was and where its successes were and the reasons for its downfall, but also the contradictions in gender, that men and women were playing with one another on stage, that was different uh, cultural backgrounds and diversity within each of the bands, and that was they were trying to meet with each other. There was the class difference, which in the UK we're defined by lower, middle, and upper class, and it's very hard to mix those classes, and so there's all these different elements, and then the social and political backdrop of Two Tone. I mean, all these factors kind of play into that keyword of contradiction.
yeah, and yeah, maybe we could go a step back and start with your journey to writing, to getting engaged in that topic. I think I heard in another interview, and I guess you were very young when Two Tone started. And what was your um, initial reaction, and how did it go through the years with Two Tone, this connection?
I mean, I probably heard Madness first, or they were the band that would have registered with me on the radio. I was an avid listener to BBC Radio 1, and I was always watching Top of the Pops, which was our key music program. And I was doing that in 1979, 1980, I think. Into 81 is when I really got hooked into Two Tone. So I was a few months behind some of the initial releases in terms of buying the records, but I was aware of them. But I think as a schoolboy, as I was then, it was easier to enjoy and understand Madness because they seemed like school kids and they behaved like school kids. And some of the subject matter was just kickabout fun. And And whereas the Specials, I think I was scared of them. They looked hard, and they were talking about knife crime and teenage pregnancy and warnings against joining the rat race. And these were all things that were looming in my future, but I wasn't part of that future yet. Whereas Madness, and also I remember connecting with UB40 very early on. They were important, I think, because they wore Levi's 501s and Fred Perry's, and it was really easy to go to the market in Birmingham, where I'm from in the Midlands, and go and buy and look like a member of UB40, although Woody from Madness dressed like that. And round the corner were the Beat, which were I guess they were my local two-tone band. But then over the years, and as I went through school, two-tone became more and more important, really. And I followed the label and I followed the bands. And so by the time of the release of The Boiler, Racist Friend, Nelson Mandela, and even the Higsons, I was really excited by the Higsons. I got expelled from school for writing Higsons on the wall of the school toilets, and the headmaster pulled me in, and I denied it, and I said there could be any one of 1,200 kids that could have written that. They're the biggest band in Britain. You know, I was lying because I only knew of one other person that liked the Higsons, and he was my friend. And the headmaster pulled out my biology textbook, and I'd written Higsons on that. And he compared it to what was written on the toilet wall. He said, it's exactly the same handwriting. I was going, no, that's the logo. Everybody writes it like that. And it's like, Rachel, you're out.
Yeah, I think it's really a big difference. I mean, I know a lot of people who are not from the UK who went into two-tone and ska later on during the ska explosion years or later in the 80s. And many of them, two-tone was a minority thing, an underground thing, and it's hard to get how big it was in the UK.
Well, it was enormous here because of commercially, it eclipsed punk. The record sales were bigger. They were selling, a single alone was selling 250,000 up to 500,000. The albums were huge and greater than the singles. Fashion-wise, the look of two-tone, the rude girls, the rude boys, the black and white, the kind of mix of skinhead mod swept the country. All of the music papers and magazines were writing about it, and the bands were front page. All of the Selector, the Specials, the Beat, the Bodysnatchers, all front pages were getting front pages. They were regularly on television. They were showing documentaries about two-tone. There were concerts of two-tone. And then they were on the radio, daytime radio, evening radio, sessions. I mean, it was huge, absolutely huge. And it was impossible to miss. And I guess I've always thought it was big in Germany. I mean, I always go to that footage of the Specials doing Message to You, Rudy. I'm not sure what program it is, but they're all miming, aren't they? Jerry's eating a guitar wire, and they're all dancing around and playing up.
That was exact. It was a music program on the German national television, and that was exactly the moment that I fell in love with the Specials. That was in January 1980, and it was and it was in the same program, in the same episode. Madness were also playing One Step Beyond. And it was a television show lasting maybe 45 minutes, and there were performances of bands one after the other, and moderations. I think I acquired this is music.
That's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
Laden, do you call it? Musikladen.
Musikladen.
Laden.
Musikladen, yeah.
Musikladen.
Yeah. I bought the
That's
DVD,
good, yeah.
but because I wanted to have the moderation, the intro of the presenters with it, but I haven't got a DVD player at the moment, so I have to check
You have to
first.
send it me then. I've got one.
Okay. Yeah, I will. And yeah, that was exactly the moment that I fell in love, and that got me hooked with the specials. And in the same uh, episode, also Sugar Hill Gang played um, their
Doing the rap, Sugar Hill
their
rap.
rap thing. So it could have happened another way that I
But
maybe.
that's the crazy thing is you can have the specials madness, Sugar Hill Gang, and the biggest band alongside Two Tone in Britain at that time was to be Adam and the Ants alongside, and so the difference in musical styles just there, rap, punk, ska,
Yeah,
and Burundi tribal rhythms, you couldn't get anything more disparate. It's a very exciting time.
yeah, really. And but for you, I guess I think the mod thing played a huge, quite a big part too, because later on you wrote about British pop music also.
Yes.
Was it both?
Do you mean in the 90s?
No, and when you started in the 80s, and I mean there were other bands like the Jam
Oh,
also big.
I was never a mod.
You were never a mod. Okay.
No, no. Where I was, you were either a mod or a rude boy. And I was 100% a rude boy. I've never been a mod.
I see. Oh,
But
sorry.
I had a
Okay.
friend. He plays in Paul Weller's band, Steve Craddock.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I saw that. Mhm.
Steve and I were at junior school together. And so we grew up together. And so he's a mod and I'm a Rudy. And
Yeah,
then Steve ends up in the specials, in the reform specials. He became Roddy Radiation. It's very weird. I'm
yeah.
going when I went to see the specials over the last 10 years, there's my schoolmates. Weird. It's wrong. and then I was friends with a band called Ocean Colour Scene, who
Hmm.
became big in the 90s. And
Yeah.
the drummer, Oscar ended up in the drummer in Rankin Rogers' The Beat. So I go and see The Beat, and there's Oscar. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah. I mean,
it's not meant to be like that your friends end up in your favorite bands. But yeah, no mod. I mean, the thing is, when I spoke to Joey Dammers for Too Much Too Young, the mod influence of what a rude boy is really important because you can't take the mod elements away from it. Linval Golding would wear desert boots. They would wear trousers above the ankle with the socks showing. Some of them wore scarves like this. I think Linval again. The suits were very similar. But then you've also got a skinhead influence. But if you look at a Jam fan and a Specials fan, you can tell the difference.
yes, 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 definitely.
But I
Well,
do love the Jam, secretly.
yeah, well, I was when I told you I was in London in 1980, and I had some kind of a holidays to learn some English too, and I stayed with a family, and their son was a mod, so he showed me everything.
Really?
He showed me how to wear a two-tone jacket, and you have this um, how it has to
Brilliant.
be. Yeah, and so I saw the differences and similarities, and he told me also, if you see a skinhead, you have to run.
Yeah. Well, there were good skinheads. Those are the
Yeah,
right-wing skinheads.
yeah,
But
yeah.
but also you would have been in here then at the same time. Your countryman Wolfgang Bueld came over with his film camera, and he filmed. He'd filmed punk originally, but then he caught the specials, didn't he? In '79, brilliant footage.
I see. I I'm not aware of this, but I have to check. Yeah, if he was there in 1979, then he was before my time because
Well, late '79, early '80, I think he's there, and he
Mhm.
records. He definitely gets the specials at Tiffany's in Coventry, And I think he records Madness, and I think Selector on it. He did 3 films, didn't he? They keep on getting changed, the name of them. You get Punk in London, Rock in London, I think it's called, and then Women in Rock. There's 3 DVDs, and they've been released on film as well. But the name always changes. But it's fantastic footage.
Wow, I have to find it out. I have to.
Yeah,
find it out.
I'm sure you'll recognize it once you see it.
Yeah, okay.
I may be pronouncing his name wrong.
Yeah, that's you can't be blamed for this. Yeah, one thing I was not confused would be the wrong word, but I found it a bit surprising when the specials reunited in 2007 or so. There were so many people who looked like they had been with the two-tone thing before in 1980, but they had just grown 30 years older. Yeah. And I was wondering, what had they done all these 30 years? I mean, didn't they?
The fans. The fans.
Move on. Yeah.
I remember I got out at Brixton Tube Station to see the specials on that reunion tour. And it was like stepping into 1979. It was absolutely exactly as you say. You know, we went into a pub, and on the street, everybody was a rude boy and a rude girl. It's like, wow, like you say, where have you all been hiding?
Yeah.
Very exciting. And it was a great gig, actually.
Yeah, I was in London at one of the shows at what was the place called? It was in Brixton, I think.
Yeah, well, that's the one.
There were
the Academy.
Yeah, at the Academy, and there were 3 or 4 shows or so. I think
2
shows. Yeah, and it was an amazing experience.
Yeah,
I mean, it was.
Jerry Dammers was at the back.
Really?
Yeah.
Ah.
He bought a ticket from a tout outside, I think. And
yeah,
he'd been in Newcastle the night before.
Okay, well, the thing about Jerry Dammers, I mean, that's something that's very close to my heart too, because he was the spiritual leader and someone that had when he said something or when he wrote something, it was very, very important to me. And so, I mean, this whole thing of the reunion without Jerry Dammers was one of these circumstances, one of these things.
Yeah, I mean, Jerry was really pleased that I didn't, in the book, go into all of that. He was pleased that I took two-tone to its natural end in 1986 when the label fell in on itself, really. And obviously I spoke to Jerry for hours and hours, and would meet and talk and text and write in the whole period of the build-up of writing Too Much Too Young. So to get his contribution and insights was very valuable.
Yeah, when I get it right, you did or he was the guy that you did talk to the most, wasn't it?
Probably, yes. Yeah, I think so, yes.
But you talked to a whole lot of people, and just to get one step back again, before that you wrote some more books about two-tone. You had or maybe not only about two-tone, but the one thing that Walls Come Tumbling Down, about ska against or rock against racism. Sorry.
Ska against racism. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's there was some festivals in Germany with this ska against racism.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I mean, Walls Come Tumbling Down was the story of Rock Against Racism and Red Wedge, with a kind of a novella of two-tone in the middle, but the political bent of two-tone, and why it forged the link between those two movements. So I mean, that book did was really pleased with that book. But but in essence, it's about rock against racism.
Mm. And then you wrote with Ranking Roger,
Yeah,
his autobiography, which I really loved. It's a great read, and it brought me closer to Ranking Roger too. Yeah.
that was brilliant because I'd go up to Rogers in Birmingham. I'm in London, and I'd stay with him for 3 days and then go back a week or two later. We did that 3 times, and we just talk. Well, he'd roll a massive spliff to start the proceedings, and then we'd talk all day in his studio. And whenever we needed to, we'd bring up footage on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So when we needed to talk about anything about a beat performance, a video, a general public, we'd watch it together. And so we had it present to talk about whether they were playing the US Festival, you know, the massive Steve Jobs thing, Apple thing in the States, right at the very end, or an early Top of the Pops performance of the beat, or a live concert. So he remembered those things anyway, but it was great because then he had the detail inside it, you know. And but he's great. I mean, Roger was brilliant, and it's such a regret he's not around today to come and do events and talk about two-tone with me. Would have been really good fun.
Mm. And yeah, there was also one time that he was self-conscious about, I think, when the Beat split and they formed General Public, and it was hard to explain whether it was necessary or what were the reasons for this. I mean,
well, I think he's quite clear by that, really, that he felt that Dave Wakeling wanted to do something different, and they could make more money if they went that way. And he persuaded Roger to go with him, and Roger agreed and went for the money. And then Roger says, "I regret it, and he wish he hadn't." Yeah. But I think he kind of said that with a great element of hindsight, because he saw what Andy Cox and Dave Steele achieved with Fine Young Cannibals, and initially they were using ideas, if not backing track ideas, of the Beats, what would have been their fourth album. And the Fine Young Cannibals were huge, absolutely huge. And Roger looked at that and then looked at what General Public achieved and thought we should have stuck, but with them. But anybody, with an ounce of knowledge of music would know that the core of the beat was obviously coming from Dave Wakeling's melodies and lyricism, but the musicality was coming from Steele and Cox. And that there's something quite brilliant about the way they approach music, not just in the beat, but what they would do with Fine Young Cannibals. Really great musicians.
Yeah. It's isn't it fascinating how much musical quality and the individual taste and momentum there was in this relatively small group of musicians and this scene. I mean, all that came from this is, it's hard to believe.
I mean, I think it's really important that after punk, that the musicianship within the two-tone bands was really strong. I mean, these were people that could play their instruments. And, if you think of the Specials, Horace Panter's bass lines draw on rock and disco in the same way as Charlie Anderson's bass lines do in the Selector. And those disco elements give the bent of the band something quite unique, in the same way that the guitar of Roddy Radiation is as much influenced by Eddie Cochran and Johnny Thunders than anything to do with Caribbean sounds. And like and you go through all of the bands, and they are people that can play their instruments. I mean, Mike Barson in Madness is such a great keyboard player. In his imagination, to use his keyboard and come up with ideas and be able to not orchestrate, but orchestrate, but but also arrange the ideas coming from the other members of the band. You know, it always struck me that Mike was the filter that everything went through, and that gave it the madness sound, which a great musician.
Yeah, I wouldn't know whether it was a Mike Parsons or the produce. I always thought the producers had their hand in it, because I mean, the other musicians weren't that accomplished maybe as Mike Parsons, but the arrangement was so good that they had their own style and created this sound, this madness sound.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, Langer and Winstanley played a really important role in that. You know, Alan Winstanley is the engineer on all the Madness records, and Clive Langer is the producer, and their input becomes more and more evident as Madness progress. And by the time you get to Our House, with the multiple key changes as the song is in its coda, that's pure Clive Langer. It's fantastic. But then Madness always made very loud records. I mean, if you put on Baggy Trousers, it kind of is loud, whereas if you put on Too Much Too Young, it's very quiet and not quiet in a way that you can turn up and make it sound more impressive. It's a quiet record. But I mean, yeah, Madness produced, engineered, but cut their records really well. And they're very important aspects of record making.
I hadn't thought about this a lot, but could we go to the in the book you start with the how Jerry Demos maybe, or how Two Tone and the Specials were formed. I mean, it's you already said that the musicians were very good, and they also had their different styles. And what was the quality that led to Jerry Demos bringing these musicians together?
Well, I think, you know, the way that Jerry tells the story is that him and a lot of the Coventry musicians were playing in various cover bands, and often in the same band at different times, and sometimes in the same band at the same time. But they were playing through, and at the same time wanting to introduce their own songwriting, and were finding that the leaders of these bands, like Ray King, for example, wasn't open to original songwriting. And so you see a pattern where Jerry would go and work with Neil Davis, or members of who would become the Selector were beginning to work with one another, or Pauline Black was writing songs and performing them in folk clubs in the back of Coventry pubs. You know, there was what's typical of any city or town is that where there's musicians find ways to play. And because Coventry is so small, I mean, you can walk across from one side of Coventry to the other in half an hour, less than that. You know, they're all going to meet, and that's exactly what does happen. And Jerry has a very clear vision of what he wants the Specials to look like, clothes-wise, look like black and white people, and sound like reggae meets punk. And so he went out and found those musicians that fitted into his criteria, and it doesn't work for a long time. And Jerry gets frustrated and goes over to Birmingham and tries to get Seb Shelton from Dexys Midnight Runners as a possible new drummer. And, you know, and Jerry tells all these stories, and eventually, just as they're about to record Gangsters, they get the final piece of the jigsaw, which is John Bradbury. And John Bradbury is a soul drummer, you know, so and a would-be teacher. You know, so the mix and the coincidences and the jigsaws falling in and fitting into place is brilliant, and it just all happens at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, I would you also talked about the social differences and cultural backgrounds, and um, I guess with 7 people, it also has to do with luck. I mean, to find um, the people who can play exactly the things. And
I don't know if it's luck. I don't know if it's luck.
yeah, okay, and
It's
a
fortunate that
bit part
those
of it, yeah.
it's fortunate that some of those characters are within a certain radius.
Yeah.
But you know, the specials had a singer before Terry Hall, and then Jerry gets rid of Tim Strickland and brings in Terry because he sees Terry fronting another band and recognizes something that would work for the specials. But when you hear the early specials demos, Terry doesn't sound very good and not convincing. And Bernie Rhodes, who would manage the specials for a short period while he was managing the Clash, wanted to get rid of Terry Hall, you know, and so, and the fact that Neville Staple is around. Neville at first is just doing the leads, and maybe that's more luck. But Jerry very carefully chooses the right people, and the same way the selector forms is it's carefully chosen who these musicians are, how it's going to work. Because in Coventry, I think more people thought the reggae band Hard Top 22 would be the success, and yet it's the majority members of Hard Top 22 that form an alliance with Pauline Black and Neil Davis and become selector, you know. And the Beat take a long time to find their path in Birmingham, you know, and they're doing gigs as a 4-piece. But yeah, I mean, yeah, luck's a strange thing. I think musicians create, you know, as a former musician, I think you create your own opportunities, and you, as a musician, and you're in places where you should be. You're in the pubs and the clubs and mixing with people, and all those elements are going to combine to you becoming the thing that you become.
Yeah, I try to think of also the being in a band. I think it's always hard to tell someone, oh, you can't be here because you are not the right. You spent here some time and you want to play with us, but you're not the right guy. And so it also has to be, you have to be quite strict to
Yes.
achieve.
I think Jerry was in his own imitable way. But all of those aspects of his personality were what attracted people to want to be part of the specials, and they're part of the two-tone, what became a movement, because there was a vision and a clear idea of thought, an ideological thought, a political thought, and Jerry had it. And it's as the book charts, when the influencing factor of fame arrives and drugs arrive and drink and touring, and then people don't fall in with Jerry in the same ways they had in 1979 and early 1980. And so what becomes its success is also inherent within it, is the downfall.
And talking about Jerry Demmers, I think, yeah, you did, as you said, you did a lot of interviews with Jerry Demmers, and you also did interviews with him for the Walls Come Tumbling Down book. How did you collect the information for this book from Jerry
Yeah,
Demmers?
I mean, some of the interviews that you'll read, or some of the quotes, are from Walls Come Tumbling Down. Um, and I thought about that, but I thought if somebody else had written Walls Come Tumbling Down, then I would have used that as a reference book for Too Much Too Young. So it seemed silly not to use stuff if I already had it. But I then revisited those conversations I had with lots of two-tone artists,
Mm-hmm.
and realized I had a lot more material that I hadn't used before or wasn't relevant to Walls Come Tumbling Down. And then, but when I started writing Too Much Too Young, I mean, I was probably I was in contact with Jerry for a good 2 years, and we had loads of conversations, and we met several times. And as I was saying earlier, wrote to one another and texted or emailed. So there was a wealth of new material. And Jerry also had the book for over a year as an initial version of it. So he was reading it and telling me things that were right and wrong, and leading me in different directions. So his contribution and presence was quite huge.
And when you started writing Too Much Too Young, you already knew so quite a lot about the label and the history. What were the striking things that you learned while writing Too Much Too Young?
I mean, there's lots really, because obviously probably like you, and from the, like, for example, the magazine on the specials I can see behind you on the piano, you know, you've been reading about the specials and Two Tone since its inception. But there's lots of things. I mean, there's very little, for example, written about the Bodysnatchers, and I found their story fascinating. And of course, you talk to members of the band and they tell you all kinds of different things. You know, like, it's absolutely hilarious that when I spoke to the piano player, Penny, she said that there was an incident in the last week of the Bodysnatchers where one of them, I think Rhoda had SJ by the throat backstage. And then Penny looked in her diary and said it was me. And she was totally shocked, and obviously transferred the incident to somebody else. And for all of her life, had believed it wasn't her. And there it was in her diary. And then Penny let me see her diary. And so it had every single entry while the Bodysnatchers were together. And also Miranda had a diary from the Bodysnatchers. So suddenly there was this personal eye hole into what was going on. I mean, Miranda would be writing about who was having affairs on the Seaside tour in 1980, when the Go-Go's, the Specials and Bodysnatchers were touring around Britain. And she knew and was saying, oh, I went with him and he went with her. So, you know, the book's not really about that, but there's an element, there's little touches. And then there's more shocking stories. I mean, that Do Nothing was originally a song written by a band that predates Two Tone, which H from the drummer of the Selector was involved with, and Gaps was in. And then when I spoke to Gaps about it, and Gaps remembered going to Woodbine Studios where Ghost Town would be recorded one day, and they recorded this song, Living in a Life Without Meaning. And, you know, and then Linval took that idea, and with Jerry's help, Do Nothing was written.
Yeah, there's some stories about this how songs came together. I mean, it's quite interesting to hear that maybe what was it, Hey Little Rich Girl, that is credited to Roddy Radiation, but I think one verse is written by other members of the Specials.
Well, Jerry wrote lots of other people's songs, and sometimes he took a credit, and more often he didn't take a credit. I mean, and the credits always change on 210 singles. I mean, I think Do Nothing has a Golding Dammers credit, and then it changes to just Golding, depending on which version you have. Mm-hmm. The same with Nelson Mandela, that there's a Dammers Dakar second pressing. It's not on the first and it's not on the later pressings. And on Friday Night, Saturday Morning, it's Terry Hall, but Jerry wrote the music without a doubt, because the music belonged to a film called The Bumper, I think it's called, that Jerry made at Lanchester Polytechnic. And I've seen the film, it's an animation. And the music, you can quite clearly hear, is what will become the basis of Friday Night, Saturday Morning. But yet there's no credit for Jerry. Technically, songwriting credit is words and melody anyway. So Terry wrote the words and melody. And then I think, you know, there's lots of songs where Horace, for example, will say, oh, Jerry wrote those words, like in Why by the Specials. You know, the Selecter, you know, Neil Davis, there's a lot of talk in Too Much Too Young about ownership of songs. And Neil Davis very much said, my songs, I wrote them, you didn't, you know, and that causes eruptions within the band, definitely. Madness have the absolute best songwriting deal, probably, that perhaps any band has ever organized in rock history. Do you know Madness's arrangement? It's very, very simple. And it was, you know the Bed and Breakfast Man?
Yep.
John Hasler. John Hasler's dad was a policeman. And it's John Hasler's dad, P.C. Hasler, that comes up with this idea. And the idea is the songs are divided down the middle, 50%. On one half of that 50%, all 7 members share 50%. The other side of the 50 is whoever wrote the song. So if it was Baggy Trousers, which is Mike Barson and Suggs, they get half of 50% plus their 7th of the other.
That's so good.
Everybody benefits.
Yeah. That's so good. I mean, I know it from bands, and you probably know it as well. That's always a topic that songwriters do get more credit than the others, and in a band, and this causes friction, and you can understand both.
Yeah, the beat shared it. The beat was 6 ways. But things like Mirror in the Bathroom, as David Steele points out, and Twist and Crawl, he brought those songs to the beat, and Dave Wakeling wrote the melodies. But I wasn't totally, I didn't know how much David Steele had written beforehand. That was quite surprising.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, after that, when he moved on and did something like Funny and Cannibals, and the production work they did also, I mean, it became more obvious how much they brought to the beat.
Yeah, but you don't know, do you? Was it them or was it Roland Gift? But I guess you hear similarities in the sound, and you go, well, it must be you two then. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting, everything. And you did all these interviews. I mean, how can you explain how big this thing was to do the interviews? I mean, how...
Well, it's nearly 100 people that I met. Pretty much every member of every band, from Specials, Madness, Selecter, Beat, Swinging Cats, Higson's Apollinaires, Special A.K.A. Not all, you know, enough members of each of those bands. Then all the people in the record company at Chrysalis. Then the
that
people
was interesting too.
The people behind the scenes at Two Tone, and then various other people that play significant parts, whether they're a filmmaker or they run the Two Tone fan club. So I was trying to get a 360 degrees rounded view of what Two Tone meant from the center out, and present it to the reader, not just as one single view, or Jerry's view, or Pauline's view, or Horace's view, but to say, here are multiple views, and a lot of the time the views contradict one another. Roddy says this, Jerry says that, Neil says this, Pauline says that, Dave Wakeling says this, Rankin Rogers says that. And I think what I'm trying to do is to say that we can't be binary in our understanding of history. History has multiple readings, and I would present readings, you know, based on research, to kind of back it up, so it's not just random comments, but that each have a validity. But it's the personal experience of one person is going to be different from the other, and it's important that those are both, they are all those emotions are felt, and ultimately the reader will make and draw from it what they feel was happening. I'm hopefully allowing the reader the opportunity to sit inside those bands to know and get a sense of what it may have been like.
I think that works perfectly well. Especially I said before, I said before how much I loved the I think the year of or the months of the decline before the split of the specials. I didn't like it hurts to read, but I never or I got such a good view from having one sentence from this person and the next how the same situation was felt or thought of by another person, and that was really captivating, and so really great. And one thing we talked about, getting together the band, and then they fell apart, and then what's also hard is the part about the special A.K.A, the album in the studio. I mean, this all fell apart even more. And I've one question that maybe is good for another book, or maybe or an article. I don't know. When Terry Hall and Linval Golding and Neville Staple split, I mean, they could have split and everyone had gone their different ways, but they formed another band. And I mean, that might have been especially hurtful. When did the name Funboy 3 come up, or when was it? I mean, what was the reason that especially those three people formed Funboy 3?
Well, you get that period after the More Specials tour at the end of 1980, where the Specials have been out on the road with their second album, and they all want to kill each other at various times, and it's decided that they need a break, a 6-month break. And in that break, as it goes into 1981, Linval, Terry, and Neville go into the studio. Remember, this is before the release of Ghost Town, but after the release of Do Nothing. And they come up with, I think, about 3 songs, of which one of them is the Lunatics. And and that's a demo that technically belongs to the Specials and will become, and was intended for the Specials. In the same way, at the same time, Jerry works on a demo with Rhoda for the Boiler. So they're all doing Linval, Neville's working elsewhere as well. Brad's working on various projects with a record label. So they're all working on stuff. Now, in the course of recording Ghost Town in the spring of 1981, when the band come back together, relationships have totally seemed to break down. Terry doesn't get what this Arabic wailing is. Neville can't hear what the song is. Linval thinks there's discordant chords within the song. Roddy's booting holes into the studio wall. I mean, they're so dysfunctional. And yet Jerry keeps on going, oh, no, this is going to be the greatest song ever. And in many ways, he's right and he's vindicated. And then suddenly it's number 1. And then at Top of the Pops, as perhaps many people know, Linval, Terry, and Neville say, we're leaving the band. But that's not what actually happens. The Specials then go, they were meant to go on a tour of America in January 1981. It was cancelled. And they decide to honor the dates. So they go back to the States for their second tour after Ghost Town, now with Rhoda in the band. So they're performing The Boiler. They're performing Rico songs within the set. And it's during that tour that it's just obvious to Terry that it's not going to work, and that Rick Rogers, the Specials manager, is going to side with the Funboy 3 and go with them. And they somehow get a very quick deal with Chrysalis. And so the Lunatics, which I think Jerry feels would have been the follow-up to Ghost Town, by the Specials becomes a Funboy 3 record. Now, the Funboy 3, Terry names them that. It's because of their morose kind of, it's kind of sarcasm. It's a great name. And I don't think the first album is very good at all, but the second Funboy 3 album is absolutely brilliant. Waiting, produced by David Byrne. Sensational record.
I had a soft spot reluctantly for the first album too, I think. But yeah, I mean, I like when I listen to the new version of the Lunatics from this the newer version from this later album,
the Funboy Specials.
The Funboy Specials, like Jerry calls them, I guess. And the newer version, I like the old one with these special drumming sounds and
it's brilliant. It's brilliant. The single is fantastic, and the Funboy Specials version hasn't got Terry on the end doing why they dropped that, but you know, so the Lunatics ends up as a special song on a #1 album. Who would have thought?
yeah, that's strange. And okay, then you it might be really good to stick to this two-tone story.
Yes.
I mean, it's so much else going on, but one thing, yeah, that I didn't know and what I found striking was Rhoda's role in at the end of the Specials. I hadn't realized it, and on in the studio too, where she this songwriting quarrel concerning Nelson Mandela was striking too. And I once did an interview with Rhoda, and she said, what did she say? I asked her what she liked most about the album in the studio.
Nothing.
No, she said the sleeve.
She also did a really good song called Can't Get a Break, the B-side of What I Like Most About You Is Your Girlfriend. I think that's a really good song. Yeah, I mean, Rhoda doesn't have a very good experience at the end of the special, A.K.A. You get the two different versions of what's going wrong in the studio between Jerry and Rhoda. And then Rhoda makes a claim on writing certain lyrics towards Nelson Mandela. And as Jerry points out, it gives the impression, if you have a dual songwriting credit, that she had a greater input than she actually did. And again, having been in bands, I'm kind of surprised that Rhoda pushed it, really. I mean, I think you just go, it's fine. You know, I've only changed a line or two or a word here or there. It's not worthy of a full credit, but that's Rhoda.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's a huge record, and it's
they didn't know that at the time, but
yeah. Yeah, that's that was also really striking in the book, the role. And yeah, well, having written this two-tone, what is it? What would you say? It's not a biography, it's a two-tone report. How would you describe the book? As a two-tone?
A book on two-tone.
A book on two-tone. Okay, a book on two-tone is very good.
History of two-tone.
I mean,
history
yeah, I think you'll never have every question answered, or but you also wrote about different topics. So what would the follow-up topic be for your next book?
Well, probably on the basis of this conversation, the love of songwriters who come together. You know, why do songwriters fall out? You know, that would make for good. You know, because you can go back, like Queen decided to give equal songwriting to each member of the band, didn't they? Famously, to avert splitting up. The Who did the same, which is why I think Who. not a sellout. What's the album before Sellout by the Who? Quick One. A Quick One Wise Away. You get really dodgy songs by Keith Moon and what's his face on the bass, John Entwistle. You know, but they're all getting a credit then, aren't they? They're all getting songwriting and getting a bit of cash. So maybe I should do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that isn't constricted to any genre. I mean, it's I mean, with the Beatles, it was the same also at some points, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, because John and Paul had a pre Love Me Do meeting where they decided that they would write as Lennon and McCartney, which would not include Harrison.
Yeah.
And they honored that until, well, actually, the first album is McCartney Lennon, isn't it?
I don't know.
Yeah, Please Please Me is McCartney Lennon.
Okay. Yeah.
If you look down the album listing.
Well, yeah, you have profound knowledge. I mean, yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Got that right. So I've said that now publicly. That's be really bad. I'm pretty certain it is, and it's gone and reversed because Lennon was in charge.
Yeah, and how will you do some readings of Too Much Too Young, or do you have already done some? I guess
I've done a lot in England.
Yes.
And I'm doing events, and I've had panel events with two-tone members there, with Rhoda, Miranda, Commie from the Selector, Horace from the Specials, and doing a big event on the South Bank in London with Pauline Black in March. And then but do you know, I've never been to Germany, but if there was a promoter that would have me in Germany, I'd love to come out and do some events.
Yeah,
there's going to be a Spanish translation and an Italian translation, but I've not been approached for a German translation yet.
Yeah, I guess maybe most of the people who are into two-tone might be interested in Britain and would be able to read the English version.
Well, that's the brilliant thing about Germans, is you all speak English so well.
Well, we try. The people, we always say that the people in the Netherlands and Scandinavia, they talk English very well. They are
yeah, Netherlands for sure. And two-tone was, you know, some great concerts I've got from the Milk Club in I think Amsterdam, of specials.
Yeah, from Milkway, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's an English translation, isn't it, Milk Club? Yeah.
Ah, I see. Okay. Yeah, it's yeah, I think yeah, I can only thank you again for taking the time to talk about the book and the special. I mean, it's a topic of ongoing fascination.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Yeah, it's through the years. I mean, it's been so long since this happened, and still yeah, still somehow fresh. I mean,
and this week in the UK, Madness are the #1 album.
Yeah,
still with us.
Yeah, great. So yeah, thanks, and yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks.
Brilliant. Dankeschön.